In our next session, Greg Moore, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Health and Life Sciences, will facilitate a discussion about ambient clinical intelligence, one of the next frontiers of artificial intelligence in health. Ambient technology captures and contextualizes the doctor-patient conversation and automatically documents care in the electronic health record. Today, this innovation is transforming the provider-patient relationship, alleviating professional burnout, improving documentation quality, and enhancing patient care. Greg and his panel of experts will also explore future opportunities for human speech recognition, natural language processing, and more broadly for AI in healthcare. Over to you, Greg.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm super excited about this next panel to discuss ambient clinical intelligence and really the next frontiers for innovation with AI in the area of healthcare. We have an amazing group of panelists here today. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Greg Moore. I'm a physician and an engineer. I serve as Corporate Vice President for Microsoft Health and Life Sciences here in Microsoft Research. And part of my role here at Microsoft Research and together now with Nuance is really to connect the entire organization together with the latest developments in AI and put them to use for really transforming what I think is really transformative to the patient-provider experience as we move forward. So with that, I'd love to get to our panelists right away and let them introduce themselves. So first off, I'm going to pass to Ya. Ya, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. Folks, my name is Kumah-Crystal. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist and biomedical informaticist and a voice technology researcher at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, Nashville, Tennessee.
Next, we'll go over to Ken.
Hey everyone, Ken Harper. I head up the DAX solution, stands for Dragon Ambient Experience. I work quite a bit with R&D in my role, looking at how we actually apply the technology to solve a very specific problem within the ambient space. So really happy to be here and talk about the ambient solution.
Thanks, Ken. And Jared, to round us out.
Thanks, Greg. So Jared Pello, I'm an emergency medicine physician. I'm a chief medical information officer at Nuance and was actually one of the first people to believe that this was something we would accomplish when I started a startup back in 2014 that was recording doctors and patients. And I love talking to the research team because you guys are making the magic happen behind the scenes. So really excited to be here.
Thanks, Ya, Jared, and Ken. As you can see, we have the folks that are actually deeply involved in bringing this technology, not only out of research and actually to the front lines of healthcare today. So on that note, and to start our discussion today, let's begin with Ken, again, the general manager of Dragon Ambient Experience, or DAX. If you could just please maybe start giving the audience a definition of what ambient clinical intelligence is and perhaps how DAX is already being used in healthcare settings today. And then finally, perhaps also share how outcomes of DAX is already having the outcomes DAX is already providing for providers and for their patients that they take.
Yeah, happy to talk about that, Greg. So ambient clinical intelligence, it is a relatively new technology category. Very similar to how you can think about Dragon Medical One as more of a dictation technology category. Ambient is this new technology category. And what it refers to is having technology that's fading into the background, sort of thinking about your physical or your virtual setting being wired for speech, where the technology can passively observe what's actually happening in a physical or virtual setting. And from those signals, that's able to pick up in a unobtrusive, passive way, leverage those signals to do something intelligent for an organization or for the users within that setting. And so it's a really exciting space that we've moved into with Ambient. And the very first use case within Ambient that we've been focused on with Nuance and Microsoft coming together is what we're delivering with the Dragon Ambient Experience. Again, we refer to it as DAX in the hallways. Most of our clients at this point refer to it as DAX. And so this is an ambient solution that involves having the ability to record in both a virtual setting and a physical setting, a patient conversation that a physician is having. And so a physician goes in, they have a natural conversation with their patient. DAX is recording that passively in the background. And from that recording, it's able to use a number of different AI technologies to convert that recording into a high quality clinical document that then shows up in the electronic health record on behalf of the physician. And so this is the very first use case of Ambient around how do we actually automate clinical documentation for the care team. What's interesting, and one thing that's really important to call out, is this is not just a transcription system. What we're doing is we're not just transcribing the words. We're actually drafting a clinical note that includes the medical integrity of what was discussed. It includes the patient story, the clinical decision-making on behalf of the provider in terms of the diagnosis and the treatment plan. This is actually a clinical summary that we're generating automatically from these audio recordings that we're able to capture within that environment. And so we launched DAX back in 2020. We literally launched it a couple of weeks before the entire country shut down with COVID. But it really was an interesting time to launch it. And it's been a phenomenal ride to see the adoption of this over the last couple of years and the impact that it's actually having on client organizations. We're running right now in 30 plus ambulatory specialties. Primary care is our fastest growing specialty by the numbers. And we have several hundred client organizations that are now signed up. And just to answer your last question, Greg, on some of the specific outcomes that we're actually measuring now that we've had this in market for a handful of years, we look at a number of different factors. One of the most important factors is physician wellness. I think we all recognize the burden that is on our healthcare workers right now. And there is a systemic problem in healthcare around provider fatigue and burnout. And DAX is a solution that addresses that problem directly. Instead of having to spend time during your day and time at night doing your documentation, DAX is doing that for you so that you can just very much focus on the patient. And so we're seeing a 70% reduction in feelings of burnout and fatigue based on users that are on DAX. One of the other things that DAX does is it also saves the physician a ton of time. Mileage will vary depending on specialty and provider, but on average, we're saving 7 minutes in documentation time per encounter. That's time we're giving back to the provider and time that we're giving back to the organization to figure out how you want to best use that time, whether it's improving access to care in places where you might have 9-month wait lists to go in and see a specialist, or whether it's just giving that time back to the provider so the provider is able to actually focus on other things. And so the amount of time that we're saving really is remarkable. And then the last thing I'll say, and one of the things that I think is probably most interesting as we think about things we're going to be measuring over the next couple of years, this is having a real profound impact on the patient experience. As patients, we're all patients. We've all had that experience where maybe you go see your primary care physician or a specialist, and as they're talking to you, they're doing this, and you don't get that eye contact, and they're just very distracted. It's not because they don't want to give you the very best outcome. It's because they have to get the documentation done in an electronic health record. And so DAX is allowing physicians to actually focus 100% on the patient while the patient is sitting there, so that you can actually make sure that patient is feeling attended to and that trust and relationship is being built with the physician. And so patient experience is also something we've really begun to measure as having a remarkable improvement with providers that are now using DAX.
Super exciting, Ken, and it's amazing how this is really transforming the physician-patient interaction and the centrality of keeping patients first here at the center, then while also addressing the what really is this epidemic of provider burnout is so critical as we face healthcare today. That brings us to Jared. Jared, I'd like to follow up with you if that's all right. I know as emergency medicine physicians, you, like I, have witnessed the epidemic of provider burnout firsthand, and it's really is one of those very difficult problems of our time. and it's been at the forefront during this pandemic and beyond now. I understand that this experience that you've had at witnessing this physician burnout has actually led you to, as an innovator, to actually dig in and solve for the problems that you were seeing there in the emergency department among your provider colleagues, and which ultimately led to DAX, the drug and ambient experience, and as we all know today, and that Ken has just described. Can you perhaps for the audience speak to the critical importance of not just building solutions for the sake of building them, but with the problems that we are actually see in front of us in mind as we do that, and perhaps additionally share how solving for this critical problem of burnout helped guide you through a research and development process for developing ambient clinical intelligence. Jared?
Yeah. Several insightful points that you kind of asked in that question that I'll take us through a little bit of my past. So I was working in the ER. I'd been there for a few years, came out of my residency, wanted to go to a big hospital. So we saw 100,000 patients a year in our emergency department, which is, at the time, it was the second busiest in Virginia. So a fairly busy emergency department. And a couple of years in, I was learning, I was growing, but I was feeling this interesting sensation inside me where I wasn't happy, where I didn't like the work that I was doing. I felt like I was getting irritable at work. And what I didn't know is that I was starting to experience burnout. At the time, I had no idea what it was. So I grabbed my partner, his name's Andy, and I say, Andy, you seem like the happiest person in our group. How do you stay so happy? And he said, Jared, every day I have off, I dread coming back to work. And so I learned two things. Don't ask Andy for a pep talk. That's number one. Number two, though, he said something that stuck with me. He said, those who seem happiest in healthcare are those who are making it better. And so I actually became a medical director because of that comment. He said that, and I said, okay, I'm gonna try to make healthcare better. So I became medical director of this smaller emergency department that our group managed, and then I started to see these problems that my providers were having, that, they had to make a trade-off between either paying attention to the patient or spending lots of time after work. There were these trade-offs they had to make. And I started to understand what was the root cause that was making me feel so bad, were these obstacles that were happening to me because I wanted to deliver great medical care. And it was really hard in the system I was working in. And the idea around DAX, recording a doctor and patient conversation, automatically finishing the note, I can't take credit for it. Every doctor has had that idea. Every doctor has said, wouldn't it be amazing if a computer would listen to me and just finish my documentation for me? And so what we learned when we moved from, okay, this is an idea, and I will say it's so helpful to have clinical insight. So as developers, as researchers, when you think of something and you think, this is a great idea, I should really build it, find somebody with clinical insight that can help you think through it. Because it was really nice that I had my own clinical insight. I was able to think through the problem on my own. But still, when we went to build our first product was based on Google Glass. And so we were recording on Google Glass, we were shooting video on Google Glass. There were some real limitations. It would die in 4 minutes. It would overheat. We had to add an Android phone that would plug it into. We did all these things to hack around what we thought was the solution. But the solution was much more simple. The solution was capture the audio conversation of a doctor and a patient. Even then, we got in our own way. Even then, we used lapel microphones for a period of time. And we thought about using Bluetooth microphones. But in the end, simpler is usually better. And we figured out, well, all we really need to do is capture the audio from the doctor and the patient, ask the physician for a little bit more information, and we can actually accomplish our goal. And so it's been interesting as you go from idea to testing to learning and back to, iterating on that idea and testing and learning, that virtuous product loop. I mean, it's so important, even more so in healthcare because it's so complicated.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see how you've innovated as the technology has evolved to what we have available today, and certainly the developments in AI have really created a change and an opportunity to bring this forward. So just really admire your ability to dig in there in the ER to see a problem and then go out and address it with a whole lot of innovation and trial and error. Yeah, you're a physician and an informaticist, but really a researcher at heart, speaking to this Microsoft research audience. So we're really valuing your input here. So from that researcher basis, what's the future prospect of ambient AI documentation, both at Vanderbilt in your clinic, and what would be the ideal state take us into the future?
I wanted to pick up on what Jared was saying about the workload that providers are facing these days and some of the challenges with burnout and feeling devalued in some of the work we have to do. And I think the issue comes down to the type of work we're being asked to do the majority of the time. In cognitive specialties where you are doing problem solving and trying to solve a disease, investigate a problem, identify what's going on with the patient, there's a lot of connection that's required to really understand what's going on with regards to having the dialogue with the patient, understanding body language, and really getting to the story at the heart of things so that you can use those clues to get to your final assessment. Unfortunately, in the current state of things, because it's important to capture what we're conversing about, and it's important to document that both for yourself in the future and for other people that are going to be taking care of the patient, the computer has become this intrusive third party in our conversations with our patients and our interactions with medical care. So the concept of being able to disintermediate that intrusion and have the computer facilitate the interactions you're having and the work you're doing, I think is such an important aspect of bringing the joy back into the delivery of care and into medicine. As Jared was saying, I think a lot of providers have thought at some point, wouldn't it be great if I could just be here with my patient, if I could go back to paper notes and just jot things down on a clipboard and really understand what was happening. But at the same time, you need to complete that aspect of work. So you're either doing it when you're there with the patients, by which you're missing out on the conversation you're having because you're half present, or you're doing it after the fact, by which your day is grown exponentially because it's twice as long now. It's the amount of time seeing the patient, then it's the amount of time documenting. So having the ability to have your conversation ambiently captured and the note generated for you while you're still present, and then being able to go back to that information and verify and in history see the things as they progress is such an important component of the care that we're going to be delivering in the future. Along with that, future-wise, being able to have the machine pick up on the orders that you want to give, the referrals that you want to place on your patient, filling with prescriptions. I think all of these things together will make the interaction with the patient more about the work you're doing, which is not busy work on the computer, but actually cognitive work and the connection and the delivery of care that matters and what people came into medicine to do.
Yes, super exciting, both what's happening now and in the future, and certainly bringing joy back to medicine is key. So I love that point. In fact, one of the first times I had the opportunity to demo DAX to one of my physician colleagues, it actually brought tears that the physician could actually bring their time back to focus on their patients. So just amazing to bring that joy back. Ken, with DAX now gaining traction in the market, which is super exciting, how we brought something fundamentally that came out of AI research and now into a product that's going to market at scale. What kinds of voice and ambient sensor data has been collected, and perhaps share with us how you plan on extending on the use cases that you can and building out the program based on the data that you've collected.
Yeah, so today the primary signal is the recording, and the primary use case is the reimagination of how you can document on behalf of a care team, or the documentation is being done on your behalf with a machine. But if you think about it, this is honestly, Greg, the tip of the iceberg. What Ambient really is it's an understanding of what you're discussing with the patient and what the patient is discussing with you as a provider as it's unfolding. And that's going to open up this brand new signal, this brand new data source to the healthcare ecosystem that has never existed in the history of healthcare. If you think about some of the clinical decision support tools, clinical intervention capabilities, the problem with a lot of these solutions is they're retrospective. They don't actually go into effect until you're doing your documentation or you're putting something into the EHR, and then there's a flag or an alert or, hey, did you think about this? And that's a problem because at that point, you've lost the ability to actually intervene with the patient unless you're doing that documentation in real time, which is also a very poor user experience for the patient. And so when we think about Ambient and the signal, and we think about the next several years of innovation in front of us, and I think this is going to be at the heart of R&D innovation, there's so much potential of DACs will begin to tag and understand what's being discussed with the patient in real time while the patient is actually still sitting there in front of the provider. And so our vision, and where I think there's going to be tremendous partnership with Nuance and Microsoft R&D teams coming together, we should be able to create a platform for DACs in an AI ecosystem where all these companies out there that have really smart algorithms on evidence-based clinical intervention and clinical decision support, they should be able to get the DAC signal where we're tagging information. We know the chief complaint of the patient. We know the diagnosis that the provider thinks the patient has, and ultimately the treatment plan. And that data, that signal that we can extend out to the ecosystem of healthcare, allow people to mine that, but then allow them to bring that intervention guidance back into the provider in real time while the patient is still sitting there, where the provider actually has the tools at their fingertips to better drive a better outcome for the patient. And so documentation is what we're focused on now, and that has real value for healthcare organizations. We're very excited about it. But the next 10 years in front of us with DACs, it's about actually building out a much broader ecosystem and moving into how can DACs actually drive better outcomes for the patient. And that's going to involve a world of innovation. And there's going to be a ton of R&D work that's going into that, both in terms of what we're doing ourselves, with Nuance and Microsoft, but also how we can enable a platform for the ecosystem. That's something Microsoft does extremely well. When you think about Azure and all the services that are exposed, DACs can very much become a signal for the ecosystem. Tons of potential of where this could go in the next handful of years.
Yeah, really exciting, the potential here, Ken. And with that potential, Jared, maybe I'm going to ask you to weigh in here a little bit from a physician's perspective on what some of the things that Ken just touched on. Certainly ambient, capturing ambient voice for documentation, critically important to address that burnout need. But this next frontier that Ken touched on was really voice as voice or voice prints as a potential biomarker for disease and treatment effects. And perhaps you can expand a little bit for the audience on what that potential could be, and keeping in mind you have a really large research audience here, and they I know are looking forward to the opportunity to dig in here and help.
Yeah, I think of it as there are things that we think we know about the future. There are things that we still don't know. But the exciting things that we do know and think we know are, using voice biomarkers for mental health. Trying to figure out, is this patient going through depression? Is a physician going through depression? Is there anxiety in this interaction? Is there a possibility that this patient isn't disclosing something to me and I should dig a little deeper? So there is some of that, but there's also, there are already models being built out there to detect Parkinson's and early onset Alzheimer's and dementia. And you can think about also just the anatomy of where voice is coming from. You know, can I tell if a patient needs more aggressive asthma treatment or COPD treatment? Can I tell if there might be some sort of an abnormality in the voice box? And that's the voice itself, the voice biomarkers. And then I think, just to add on to what Ken said, I think of the conversation, and I've never said this out loud, so it might be a terrible analogy, but I think of it as the stem cells of data, of medicine. It's not differentiated yet. You can take that conversation and differentiate it into a medical note. You can differentiate it into clinical scoring or clinical decision support, risk scoring. You can differentiate it into all sorts of things. And we're collecting the stem cells, or this base layer of data that's needed to differentiate into all these different things. And I just think we know there's tremendous potential, but I don't think we really understand how much potential yet. And I think, like you said, Greg, I'm talking to the right people. These are people that are going to think through, like, well, have you thought of this idea, or have you thought of this idea? There's so much potential out there.
Yeah, and I think the voice, as you said, is really turning out to be a very rich source for discovery. As you said, that anatomy, this as I'm talking now, cognitive, lungs, cardiac, among others that are all potential biomarkers for what's going on. So it's truly exciting frontier, and a lot of space for research and development here. So truly an exciting time. As I talk about research, I want to come back to actually, to go forward as we take this forward, and to maybe up level a little bit from ambient voice capture to what you think is the general power and potential for human voice in healthcare. And I know that, and I've read that you're a bit of an evangelist here in this area, and perhaps you could share with us what you think the opportunities are for the human voice in AI, and where we might be heading in the future. I'll let you expand on that.
Sure. I think what's fascinating about voice and speech and how we interact with each other, it's such a complex system of give and take and understanding to build new knowledge and move further with where we are. What we're doing right now, where we're exchanging ideas using voice, and that's just how we as people grow in the world. And in the medical realm, that's how we get new information from our patients, their stories, again, to understand how to help move them forward and take them towards the path of health that they're desiring. With the information that we're able to derive from voice, from dialogues, the free text data in the EHR has always been some of the hardest things to get to, some of the most intricate and rich source of the patient's phenotype in the EHR. But being able to have a path where you're capturing that and being able to tag it and having the complexity around what evolved that conversation, that note, can open up an entire world of investigation. So the sentiment analysis behind the exchanges that were had, just thinking through medical education to understand how people develop and change the way that they're understanding information, explaining information to patients, understanding how relationships with patients evolve over time based on the conversations that are being had. There's so much to be said about this primary way that we interact with each other and having that now as a data source to understand care based on conversations and interactions with the patient and the medical system. With regards to kind of the future and where things could be, I think the patient themselves being the source, being able to have them interact with systems that can share their information with the health system about how they're doing, how they're feeling, and being able to derive that using smart intelligence to queue up things they need and prescriptions they need to minimize the friction that it takes to get to that, I think is going to be an amazing place that makes healthcare more accessible and hopefully equitable also. So understanding how different people speak and how different people communicate and incorporating that into our data models to make sure that everyone is able to leverage these technologies is going to be one of the most important things that we should focus on in the future.
Yeah, yes, certainly important, and I think social determinants of care and using this technology to address health inequities is a critically important area and an opportunity space for us as we go forward here together. Unfortunately, we're reaching the end of our allotted time. I think I could take this conversation on for at least another 45 minutes or an hour. I want to thank all of the panelists, Jared, Ken. This is some amazing insight you shared with us today. It's and from one of my takeaways here is we've used research and development process with an acceleration of AI to actually in a relatively short period of time create an amazing tool that's already transforming the documentation experience in the clinic for our providers. It's already begun to transform the patient and provider experience. But that's really amazing to see that. But it's also clear that we're still in the early days here of what ambient intelligence and ambient clinical intelligence is likely to deliver. And so this future work on biomarkers and bringing more insights with the data that we have I think as a physician and multiple physicians here on the panel today, I think we're all excited about the future of what this can deliver for the patients that we care for. So with that, you were going to say something?
I have just a little anecdote that I just thought of now based on something that was mentioned earlier. I have a colleague that we go back and forth about voice technology and the voice assistants we have today, and maybe some of the limitations they have and what the future state is. And he would very strongly affirm that he might be a bit of a Luddite and just doesn't really understand where this is going. At the same time, he's a huge Star Wars fan. And we were having a conversation. I'm like, what do you think about C-3PO? And he was like, oh, well, he's the greatest character of all time. And I was like, well, what do you think about the interactions that, he has with, Luke and all the others, and just the existence of that entity? And does that make sense? Like, if you could have your own little C-3PO following you around, being a little neurotic, but maybe helping you out in clinic, would that make sense? And his eyes lit up, and it just kind of connected in a way that it hadn't before. So right now where we are is we're so early, and there's this whole world ahead of us that I don't think we fully have our minds around. That, all the way in the 70s and 80s, people were envisioning and dreaming of these worlds that can exist where our computers, our technology allow us to interact with it the way we would interact with ourselves, and bring us information and allow us to share information, allow us to be ourselves. So that just came to mind with regards to just the future that could be, even for folks that might not necessarily see where we are right now, and recognize that we do have ways to go.
Yeah, really, I'm really glad you brought that point, both as a Star Wars fan and I think we all would like an intelligent assistant, particularly us as providers that are really trying to provide the best care and safe care for our patients. Any closing thoughts, Jared or Ken, that you'd like to add?
I'm not going to add after that. I mean, I'm more of a Star Trek person than a Star Wars person, but no, I think a smart computer helping you out, 100% on board. And I love thinking up ways to teach people things that they don't quite grasp yet. So great job, on doing that. Anything else, Ken?
I just think the next 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this point in time and say it was a true inflection, with the technology and the data that we're now collecting, and how that data actually can drive meaningful value back into the healthcare system. I think 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this conversation. It's going to be just remarkable how far we will have come by that point.
Yeah, it's super exciting as we go forward. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists here today. It's been an amazing discussion, and I know we're looking forward to some Q&A from members of our audience. Thank you all.